final session of the Summer Sustainability Summit hosted by One Click LCA. What a fantastic 2 days it has been. I hope that you've gotten a lot of great insights from the sessions you were able to attend. Really excited about today's session. I know I've learned a lot over the last 2 days, and I hope that you have as well. Before we get started, I want to invite you to let us know where you're joining from. So we have a global audience. This has been a global event with leaders all over the world, and we're really excited to see where you're calling in from. So jump into the comments section if you're joining us on LinkedIn, go into the chat if you're on Livestorm, and let us know what city, what country you are joining from. Now, today's conversation is going to be so interesting. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about driving sustainable manufacturing through circularity. So we will be talking about what manufacturers can do to promote more sustainable manufacturing, why some of the old guard methods might not always be the best, and looking at circularity as a tool to drive sustainability forward. Now, the Summer Sustainability Summit is hosted by One Click LCA. We are the world's leading platform for LCA and EPD creation for the construction industry. With our software, you have access to over 250,000 LCA data sets, 20 integrations, and we have the tools needed to comply with over 80 global standards and regulations. We have been powering the makers of a zero carbon future for over 20 years. So we have been in this industry for a while, and we're really excited to see where it's headed. And that's a lot about what we'll be talking about today. So today I am so excited to announce our guest. We are going to be joined by the CEO of Canam Group, Marc. So glad to have you here today.
Hi, Eileen. Thank you. Glad to be here too.
Awesome. And for those of you who are joining, Canam Group specializes in the fabrication and manufacturing of construction materials, and specifically focused on metal and structural steel fabrication. So we're going to get some really great insights into how we can get sustainable with our manufacturing today. And Marc and I are both joined by One Click LCA's very own Travis. So he is an LCA and EPD consultant for One Click LCA. He is an expert in the EPD space, which we will be talking more about that a little bit later. So Travis, great to have you here as well.
Thanks, Eileen.
Now, we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to stop sharing my screen here. And, I'd like to start this with some introductions. So, Marc, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself. Tell us how you got into this industry, why sustainability is important. Give us a little background.
I was 14 years old in the plant. And my father looked at me and says, "You're a man. Let's start in the plant next week." And I cried, and that's how I got into the industry. But it's a family business. We've been at this for 63 years, and it's like a lot of journeys in life. You start meandering, and then it gets clear, and you can make a difference. So I've been at this for a long, long time, and hopefully we can make a difference.
Fantastic. That's a great story. You started young. Travis, what about you? If you could give a little bit of your background, introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. So I've been in construction for 20 years also. Started fairly young, actually started on site as a carpenter. Went back to school through various different tranches, and I've always been a bit of a sustainability nerd, and felt that the way that we were building things could be done better. And a couple of years ago, came across One Click LCA and joined the team here. And I think that what we're doing to target not just carbon emissions, but other environmental impacts as well is just, I think there's a lot of potential for improvement, and I think we're going about it the right way.
That's fantastic. Yeah, a lot of good things happening in the industry. A lot of work to do, but we're excited to do it together. So let's go ahead and jump right into this conversation. This first question, Marc, I want to pose it to you, but then Travis, if you have some comments as well, feel free to join in. But Marc, how do you see sustainability, which is a lot of what we talk about, coinciding with other initiatives, specifically health and safety at Canam and in the industry overall?
I think it's a really important question, because everyone in construction who's been at this for maybe 15, 20 years remembers how we thought about safety 20 years ago. Okay. 20 years ago, I mean, it's illegal to hurt people. You have to provide, a safe work environment, safe instructions. You have to exercise the disciplinary measures when it's required. But you could, unintentionally, but legally, have a workplace where people get hurt. Just check the boxes, do your job. No one's going to jail. And then one day you realize, if I don't move from trying to follow the law to trying to keep people safe, I'm just going to have something that's acceptable, but it's not going to change the world. Okay. And at Canam, and I'll be specific, July 2017, I had a conversation with a colleague who says, Marc, how do you think we're doing in health and safety? I said, we're fine. We're following the law. We're following the goal, and we're going to reduce by 10% this year, and the board's happy. He says, okay, but do you realize this answer makes it acceptable to hurt 60 more people this year? And I said, what do you propose? He says, what's wrong with 0? Okay. And it's like the light went on in my head. Okay. We'll never get people safe if all I'm doing is trying to check boxes. And now that I was giving a keynote speech for our industry maybe 5, 6 years ago, and someone asked about health and safety. And my answer was great. It came from the heart. I knew what I was talking about. I knew what we were doing, and it was felt. And then the person says, what about sustainability? Like, well, we follow the law, we do this. And then I came back to our office saying, I missed that answer. It was administratively correct, but it's not the answer that's going to change the world. Okay. And now I look at sustainability as, okay, it has to go from trying to follow the law to trying to change the world. Okay. And everyone at Canam's been through the health and safety journey. They know how insistent we've became. And I say, expect this to be the same for sustainability. So it gives me a great shared experience to now project into sustainability at our company. That's how I would answer your question, Eddie.
Marc, I love that answer. I feel that the two are really intertwined in the same, from that perspective, where I think that, part of the reason that we're interested in sustainability and the reason that we're going through the measures that we are in the sustainability space is to prevent that, whether it's health and safety, potential injury in the future of people around us, and health and safety in a manufacturing facility or on a construction site. We've got a group of people, but when it comes to climate change, that's something that affects really the global population, and we really have an opportunity to make an impact. And I love that mindset approach.
Yeah, there's a thing called the Bradley curve for health and safety, and it's the worst companies in health and safety are just trying to follow the law. The very, very best have created an interdependency between workers, and everyone's looking out for one another for the whole good. And you can transpose this to sustainability in a second. It's the same curve. Okay, we have to work our way through it now.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely, I think giving hopefully some folks in our audience some inspiration for the way forward, and like you say, how we can change from just doing sort of the bottom line requirements to something a little bit better that ultimately achieves more. Now, this is a little bit of a change, but we've discussed this before, Marc, and I know you're passionate about it, but I'd like you to talk about the myth of recycling and how that relates to sustainability of construction materials specifically.
Okay, so when I don't know how old I was, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my brother and I would walk along the road and pick up bottles and cans and go to the store, and they'd give us, 30 cents, and we'd buy bubble gum. The idea of picking up something and somebody was going to give you something for it, I mean, I was born with it, okay? And I thought that was enough, okay? And to the degree that the recycling cycle, okay, the recycling journey prevents exploitation of land and site, that's fine. But in steel, the world that I'm in, throwing a piece of metal in a scrap bin, okay, is waste. And when you think you could pick up a bottle by the side of the road and get something for it, you might believe that throwing something in a scrap bin is a good gesture, but it's truly a waste, okay? And the amount of energy and CO2 emissions required to turn the scrap bin into new steel, and it depends on the source of energy and some processes, but on average, you emit more CO2 to recycle the steel than the weight of the steel being recycled. So then you realize, okay, is this the 5-year-old boy still picking up bottles for bubble gum and he's happy and it's enough? Or we suddenly have to look at something else. And we were educated on the recycling. We all do it in our homes. There's a blue trash can, there's a green trash can, there's a brown trash can. And once we've thrown something in it, we feel good. It's not enough, okay? And we have to realize it.
So with the, I'm just, I'm with the recycling, like I think we're going to get into this conversation of circularity and repurposing products that have already been constructed, and something that I've thought about, and I think there's been kind of half measures and people trying to cut through. I'm going back to the bottles and cans scenario of how do we design bottles and cans that are actually reusable as they are? Can we clean them and run them back through the system? And you actually see it in Latin America with the Coke bottles that actually do just get collected and cleaned and refilled. Can we do that in the construction industry? I think is ultimately where we'd like to get to, is can we disassemble, reuse as the products are, and continue to move forward, manufacture once.
You guys ready for an anecdote? Okay.
Yes, please.
There is in the 70s here, there's a guy who made his own soda. So I come from a small town, but they had a local producer of soda. And the guy's kids would take his empty, clean bottles, go to the store, and be given money so they could buy candy. So they figured out, okay? But at least the bottles weren't melted, okay? The bottles just went around in a 10-mile circle, okay? And it was perfect reusability, okay? And suddenly the circle's not 10 miles anymore. The circle is 1,000 kilometers. It's become, wasteful. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, that actually, this kind of leads perfectly into my next question, is which is, how can we design better for disassembly and circularity? So maybe expand on these thoughts a little bit. What does circularity in manufacturing look like? What does the future look like, and how can we be thinking about this from the beginning, rather than at the end looking at the bottle that we have and saying, how can we reuse this? But how can we be thinking about this from the very beginning?
Yeah, a construction project is layers. Okay, I mean, layers in 3D of all sorts of stuff. Okay, a beer bottle is something relatively pure and simple. The building is insulation and wires and wood and glass. It's more complex. I think this is the future. I would love our firm to lead the way. And I called an extremely large recycler. Okay. And I said, tell me about the process by which we could deconstruct a metal structure, okay, and preserve the components, okay, and reuse them. And he says, Marc, it'll never work. I said, what do you mean it'll never work? He says, I've had these vintage beams in a yard somewhere. I mean, for 10 years, I kept them. Architects looked at them, engineers. Do you have can you certify the grade? Can you do this? Can you do that? I said, look, I'm just the recycler. He said, well, then I can't use them. Okay. And it was never thick enough, never long enough. And 10 years later, after moving them from warehouse to warehouse, I melted them into new steel. Okay. So the story is real. And it says that we have to design for circularity. Okay, I don't think you can, sure. Okay, go take a random piece of metal and try to do something with it. You will. But to build a 15-story high-rise that an engineer will put a stamp on it, and people will be safe, you have to design that at the end of the life of your structure, you will reassure people trying to retask the components. Okay, that's really so traceability. Okay, documentation that lives beyond your legal requirements right now. So documentation that's available 75 years from now. And then you can think about the process by which something is built. It is very difficult to unweld something. It is really relatively simple to unbolt something. Okay, so you have to think about, how do I build? And the example I can give you is silly, but we're modernizing the furniture in this office because people now want tables that rise and all sorts of, they want to work standing up. And we have perfectly good furniture that nobody wants anymore. Okay, it's horrible. But if somehow we had 3 types of table legs and 4 types of chair legs and sometimes standard ways of building, I could retask the components. So it's more than steel. It's all sorts of things we built that we don't know how to retask at the end of a life. But I think that's the way we truly save emission. Okay, we truly save junkyards, and we save people all sorts of energy, okay, and time.
Marc, you mentioned tracking, and I think that's a really important piece. Do you think there would be value of having like a longer responsibility requirement for products that are being sold? Because often there's, we sell a product, there's a warranty period. Once that warranty period is up, us as a manufacturer, our hands are clean, and we can carry on. But I guess what are some of the challenges you could see with extending that lifespan, so that we are thinking about what happens at the end of the life of the product, and maybe the failure of the product could be kept at a shorter lifespan, but the responsibility,
I think it's
at the end of life.
I'm going to split this into warranty, okay, the guarantee of performance, and documentation, the survival of documentation, okay. And imagine this is metal. If it was an airplane frame, you'd want to know how many cycles this was in, okay, pressure cycles, because this metal will get weaker. You might in 50 years open up a building, get a beam out of it, and it's just brand new. Or the thing might have been a place where it's all constantly cycling in terms of load, and it's lost its capacity. So I think we have to start introducing monitoring of structures. Was this structure stressed in any way? Fire may mean, a building may be exposed to fire, they rebuild it, and 20 years later, you don't know that this component was subject to heat. So you have to find a way to monitor, okay, document, monitor, and maybe your monitoring and documentation life is beyond your warranty, okay, and it's mandated. And when they deconstruct, they have access to this precious data, which now makes it, you can trust the data to reuse. Okay.
That's really interesting. And I know, like, in some aspects, we're putting sensors into concrete, for example, to monitor, is it at its full strength or 98% strength or whatever it is. Being able to do this with other structural components as well. I think we have the technology to be able to do it. I think it's just a matter of reducing cost of some of these technologies and really implementation.
And it's hard to have a present cost for a future benefit. Okay, it's who's going to pay for something that's going to be worth more in 50 years. Okay, and I think public policy will be really, really important to mandate certain things, because people on their own aren't usually willing to pay now for a 50-year later benefit. That's a big component of this.
Mm. It brings my mind to carbon credits, and it's a murky topic. But really, what we're trying to do with the carbon credits is bring those future costs up towards the front to hopefully change consumer behavior. And how do you apply a price to those? It's really, really difficult. But the fact that there is a price, I think, has a pretty significant impact. And maybe there's some sort of a market-driven aspect of something that we can do in that area. Just throwing it out to the public as if anybody has ideas, there might be something there.
Well, I would argue that if a producer of components can somehow guarantee, it's not the wrong word, but can certify the future value of the product being used today, that's probably deserving of a carbon credit, because it's preventing carbon in 50 years from being used. But yesterday we had a meeting internally about greenwashing and all sorts of false claim, and I sense this gets difficult. Okay, to claim 50 years from now, here's what's going to happen. That's a difficult proposition.
Yeah, I think this is such a fascinating topic, and what the ultimate solution will be. But it's so important to be thinking about these things in this way. How will this work? How can we design for this in the beginning? And data, like you said, if we're going to be tracking how these items perform or what happens to them through their life so that they can be reused, data is going to be really important, which leads me into my next question, which is going to be about environmental product declarations, or EPDs. So Travis, I'm going to ask you first if you can describe to some of the people in our audience may not be as familiar with the term EPD. If you could describe what is an environmental product declaration, and then specifically, what do we mean by Scope 3 emissions?
Yeah, so an EPD is essentially a specification document showing what the environmental impact of a product is on a specific unit measure. It's an ISO-defined process to be able to generate these, and they're kind of the gold standard of product verification, showing this information. And primarily, I guess you had asked the question about Scope 3, and Scopes 1, 2, and 3 are actually shown in the EPD data for the manufacturer that's produced this information. But I think what you're getting to with the Scope 3 question is that this is kind of some of the best quality data that you can provide for Scope 3 to downstream users for this information.
And maybe go ahead and just define Scope 1, 2, 3, basically, just for anyone in our audience who doesn't know what those refer to.
Sure. So Scope 1 would be any fuels or emissions that are coming from my specific operation. So let's say vehicles that are being driven within my company, those are going to have direct emissions. Scope 2 would be any emissions that are off-site, but I'm using. So an off-site coal-fired power plant, the emissions from that but they're delivering electricity to my facility. That would be Scope 2. Scope 3 is really everything else. Products that I'm purchasing and these sorts of things definitely fall into that category.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And so I just kind of wanted to lead up so we have a sort of full understanding of what an EPD is, what information it provides. And then, Marc, I wanted to ask you, Canam recently published your first EPD. You've got some more that will be released soon. So congratulations on that. That's fantastic. And I wanted to know, how do you see the value of having an EPD for your company? Sort of what is the business value of that? Not just tied to, obviously it's good for sustainability because we can see where emissions are coming from, but what other values do you see there?
There was a sustainable building conference we attended, and people were, everyone had like half an hour on stage and presenting their stuff. And at one point, my colleague says, "How is this even certified? Okay, who's backing these claims, and how do you know if it's even true?" Okay, so it didn't take a long time for us to say, okay, wait a minute. Okay, what is their process? So I think the Canam's first EPD is our ability to present, document, baseline where we are with specific products. When I read it's a Muroxwell EPD, it was really interesting because what about, my God, I've never thought about insulation materials. Okay, I've never thought about the paint on the deck sheet. I've never thought about all sorts of things which this document contained, including lifetime. Okay, and so education, certification, trustworthiness to specifiers, a baseline. Okay, so it's a scoreboard. Where are we starting from? It was a source of pride as well. So for our Canam's multiple division, but for the division that has its first EPD, then others said, "Gee, maybe, well, not maybe, I need one too." Okay, so it was beneficial in many ways. I'm glad we went through the process, and I just want to go back on Scope 1 and 2 and 3 that Travis talked about. I just did the math while you were speaking. For every over $100,000 of revenue at Canam, we emit 1 ton of CO2 in Scope 1 and 2. So 1 ton per 100,000 of revenue, give or take, okay? 50 tons of emissions for the same amount of sales in Scope 3. Okay, so our Scope 3 is huge, okay? Because the entire company has maybe 13,000 tons of CO2 emissions for its entire footprint, but that's about 2% of our Scope 3 emissions. So it's really important, this distinction. And then you get to focus on the materials you use, not recyclability, but reusability. It's been really important for us to look at that.
And a really important piece that I did leave out in that definition is that Scopes 1 and 2 are reasonably easy to collect. It's really just in your energy consumption data and being able to extrapolate that into emissions. Scope 3 is being from most of it being from third parties. It's a bit more difficult to collect that data, and most of the requirements, particularly most recently the SEC's scope emissions reporting requirements, they pulled Scope 3 out of those requirements. And I think the justification is there. It's genuinely difficult in a lot of cases to collect that data. On the flip side, Marc, the work that you guys have done of producing the EPDs, this is some of that, like some of the best quality Scope 3 data that you can be providing to those downstream users. And the more that we're demanding this information, the more we can fill in that gap and really understand, where are those additional tons of Scope 3 data coming from, and how can we then make improvements on those.
Just okay, silly is the wrong word, but people shouldn't be dismissive of Scope 3 emissions, saying, oh, that's not my problem. Because when we have our own truck, like a truck with a Canam logo delivering our product, it's a Scope 1 and 2. When we subcontract the freight to a third party, Scope 3. It's the same thing. So you shouldn't be able to get away too easily with shifting things to Scope 3. It's still emissions, okay? And it's still a choice. So it's opened my eyes to that as well.
That's a really good example.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to sort of the theme of today's conversation, which is looking further. You need to look at more. You need to do more than sort of the minimum requirements. You can't just look at the very sort of first level of what you're doing. Look at all of the choices that you're making, because they really do have a big impact. And that number you provided about, the large proportion of your emissions coming from Scope 3 is just, it's fascinating, but it also says that we need to have more people looking at Scope 3 since it is so important. Now, this next question is a little shifting gears, but Marc, I'd like to ask you, for organizations that are planning to grow through acquisition or are currently growing through acquisitions, how do you maintain commitments to sustainability when some of these companies that you're acquiring didn't have as much of a sustainability focus as Canam Group does? Or, how could other companies that are maybe thinking about growing through acquisition, how should you be thinking about that?
Okay, this is going to sound horrible, but it's like, I'm not going to adopt this child because he needs a shower. Okay, adopt the child and clean him up. Okay, you can't make yourself so pure that you won't touch other companies or somewhere else in their sustainability journey. Okay, and I had this debate with my colleague, and she says, "Oh, we now have to decide that we won't buy companies with high emissions." I said, "No, we should buy companies with high emissions. That's the best thing we can do for the planet, because then we will come in with a leadership they haven't had." Okay, so I think it's and it's funny because I think, not now, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, companies who are slow on their sustainability journey will see that their value, okay, is hurt by that. So when you make acquisition choices, you might have more value at buying someone who's a little late. Safety is the same, by the way, okay? Diversity is the same. People who aren't engaged in sustainability efforts will have less license to operate. They will be worth less. And people who are ready to help them are probably the best buyers, okay, for those companies, for the employees, for the clients, for the communities. So Canam is it's a famille réorganisée. I'm trying to look at the English words, like foster family. Bring them in, okay? Come home.
Yeah, that's
nothing
fantastic.
I wish there was an applause emoji on this. That's absolute gold.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and that's such a great outlook of, like you say, get those companies that don't have this as a goal, and then it's better for the planet, it's better for everyone. So that's a fantastic and inspirational way to think about this. So this last question is sort of looking a little bit outside of operations in North America. And, I'd like you both to comment on this, because you both have experience in the space. But how do you see European standards impacting operations in North America? So it's pretty well known that there's a lot more regulations, especially around sustainability in Europe currently than we have in North America. And is this something, standards that are current in Europe that may be coming to North America? Is this something companies should be thinking about? Is this something they should be thinking about specifically when they're creating EPDs, or just generally? And Marc, I'll start with you.
Okay, so the problem with Quebec is 98% of our energy is renewable, and it's the cheapest in North America. Okay, so the choices we made, the systems choices, okay, the footprint choices, all sorts of choices are driven by economic decisions, and we've never truly considered energy a driver in decision making. When you look at Europe, it doesn't even have to be about sustainability, but energy cost. And if you reduce energy consumption, you're helping with emissions. But Europeans have had to deal with expensive energy, okay, and have made better choices. So when you look at systems and process in Europe, they're ahead of us because we haven't had to make these choices yet, okay? So I think it's Europe and elsewhere. There are other places in the world where energy is expensive and they make better choices than we do. Okay, so I think to answer that question, that's what I would say, Eileen. Okay.
Yeah, and following on Marc's coattails there, I think Europe has really they've led the world in this charge, and they do have more standards and some more stringent requirements. And if you speak to an economist, they'll say, "Oh, that's some of the reasons why Europe might be struggling in some areas." But I think that the leadership that they've shown in the sustainability space has really built a strong foundation that they're well established in the space, which the establishment of these things is the difficult part, and they can now continue to grow on that. And the flip side of that too is that the road is now paved for us in North America. So even though we have some different requirements, some different standards here, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. There might be some modifications and things like that as we move forward, but many of these standards and challenges have already been gone through. So I would like to think that the journey should be a lot easier for us and the adoption much quicker.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, this has been a really, really great conversation touching on a lot of topics. I think a lot of sort of inspirational messaging for our audience about what they can do, how they can be looking at sustainability differently. And of course, you're in manufacturing. We talked a lot about manufacturing today, but a lot of these principles can just apply across the board to any industry, who wants to get innovative with their sustainability. And I'm just going to put a few more slides on the screen here. I just wanted to share this sort of top 3 takeaways, what we talked about, and a lot of what I got out of this conversation. Circularity is the future, as we talked about. Recycling the old way doesn't always work, whereas circularity, disassembly, this looks like it will really be the way that we can reuse these materials going forward. Data and transparency, of course, when we're talking about EPDs, but also, as you mentioned, when we were talking about how can we extend these products' life, we're going to need data, we're going to need transparency for all of that. And then we didn't really use this word necessarily specifically, but innovation. So much of what you are doing, Marc, with Canam is about innovation. It's about looking at what's required, what's the status quo, and why we need to do better, why you decided to shift, why you're pushing that envelope. So, I mean, it's totally inspiring. I think we can all have a big takeaway that we need to look at how we can do things differently and better. So really, really great conversation today. Now, I've been asking a lot of questions about Marc and Travis or questions of Marc and Travis, but now I have a question for our audience, which is, now that we've talked a lot about manufacturing, if you're interested in harnessing some of your data, getting a better look at it, and creating an environmental product declaration yourself, we'll be happy to offer you a demonstration of our software. So there's going to be a poll if you're joining us from Livestorm that will pop up on your screen. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, we'll put a link in the comments section. But if you would like to schedule a free consultation, a software demonstration, just say yes to the poll. Let us know in the comments, and someone from One Click LCA will reach out to you, and we'll be able to schedule that so you can get started on your innovation journey and tracking your data so that you can be more sustainable. And speaking of sustainable manufacturing, I wanted to highlight that we have a low carbon manufacturing awards contest. It's going on now. You can scan the QR code, which is on your screen, if you'd like to learn more. This contest is celebrating low carbon solutions in manufacturing. We want to put a highlight on those manufacturers that are doing things sustainably. And it's a way for you to benchmark your processes against your competitors. It's a way for you to gain media exposure and ultimately win more business. So if you're a manufacturer, any industry, any size, scan the QR code, learn more about this contest, and see if it's right for you. And then I also wanted to highlight, at One Click LCA, we think education is so important. We have a goal to train 1 million low carbon professionals by 2030. And part of that, we offer free training through our academy. So if you scan the QR code here, you can learn about our upcoming EPD bootcamp. It's a 1-week immersive training sessions, 2 hours a day. You can learn all about EPDs, and it's recorded. So if you can't make the live sessions, you can still do the training on your own time. And of course, always, we'd love to keep the conversation going. So you can always contact us at oneclicklca.com. But now I'd like to bring it back to the conversation. And like I said, really, really inspirational. So many great things that you're thinking about, things that you're already doing. And I'd like to throw it back to both of you for maybe just some final words of wisdom for our audience, what you got out of this conversation. So Travis, I'll let you start, and then we'll let Marc close it out.
I think it's kind of hard to narrow it down. Marc, you spit out a lot of really great anecdotes and stories there, and it's really hard to zoom in on one of them. But I think the Scope 3 aspect that you covered, I think, is really important, and just taking the responsibility of finding the companies that need the most help for your acquisitions, and just taking the responsibility of stepping in and saying, how can we both help and make a business case out of this and make some money with this. So I think that's a really great approach. But also just, recognizing Scope 3 is I think a lot of organizations are looking at that as, not my responsibility. It's not my problem. It's happening on somebody else's books. But as we start to look at these things, it really helps making the decisions of where we're purchasing our products and services from.
Fantastic. And Marc, what are your thoughts today?
Okay, so I'm going to finish on a serious note. Whether you're in the US, Canada, or other countries, it's very difficult to be in a happy zero carbon bubble by yourself. It's very, very difficult. And public policy choices have to be made. And if public policy requires local manufacturers to meet certain standards, but the trade relationships allow for the entire world to come and compete with you, it's probably the number one impediment to the courage to go net zero. Okay, if I do this, do I then lose against a supplier who ships to my country things with lower standards? Okay, so the desire for manufacturers to go to the lowest carbon footprint possible is made so much easier when the public policy around trade reflects the cost of and the benefits of doing that. Okay, it's really, really important. Is that too serious a topic to finish with?
No, I think it's absolutely important, and I'm sure that we do have a few minutes, so it's like you say, it's serious, but it's important. It's where we need to go if we're going to make this shift to sustainable, because like you say, sort of everyone needs to be on board for this to work, and to get everyone on board, public policy is the best.
Everyone means everyone,
best way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being at the forefront of this movement, Marc. What you are doing with Canam is really inspirational, and of course, here at One Click LCA, we love to see this kind of movement. And the more businesses that operate like you do, the more likely those public policies will be to go in place. So fantastic. And thank you again so much for joining us today, sharing your insights. Travis, thank you for sharing your insights as well. And I want to thank our audience today. It's been, like I said at the beginning, it's been a really fantastic 2 days. And man, what a session to sort of wrap everything up. I think that this was inspirational. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I want to thank also all of the global leaders who joined us on this 2-day summit and who presented with us, over 30 leaders, 14 sessions, 2 days. It's really been an exciting and fantastic journey. So thank you all so much. I hope you guys all have, a great rest of your week, time to implement some of the key insights that you took away from this. And we will see you on the next summit. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.